My name is Frank Lawson. I'm 62 years old, a retired Marine who traded boots for boots of a different kind, cowboy boots, when I came back from service and built my life on 80 acres of Arizona soil. For nearly 4 decades, this land has been my pride. Mesquite trees bending against the wind, fences I hammered myself, barns that still smell of hay and diesel. People in town call me stubborn. Maybe they're right. But when you've fought wars overseas, you don't let go of the ground you've bled on at home. Life had slowed down since my wife passed 6 years back. My daughter Laura and her husband Derek started visiting more often, which I took as a blessing at first. She'd bring casseroles, Derek would lend a hand fixing the tractor, or so I thought. But lately, something was off. It began with a letter from the county registrar. Confirmation of property transfer request. I held it under the lamp, reading it twice. Transfer? I hadn't filed for anything. When I asked Laura about it, she brushed me off with a smile too tight to be genuine. Derek muttered something about clerical errors and changed the subject. At Thanksgiving dinner, I caught Derek staring at the deed binder on my shelf, the one that holds every record of this ranch. His eyes lingered too long. That night, after the guests had gone, I checked my desk drawer. One folder was slightly out of place. Inside, my signature appeared on a form I had never seen before. Crooked, uneven, but mine, supposedly. I sat back in my chair, heart pounding. For a man who's stared down insurgents with rifles, it takes a lot to make my hands shake. But seeing my name forged on a document that threatened the only legacy I had left, that did it. The house was quiet except for the ticking clock, but in that silence I could almost hear their voices echoing. He won't notice, he's getting old, he'll thank us later. That was the moment I knew. Something was wrong, and it was only the beginning. The following Sunday, Laura insisted I come over for dinner. She said Derek wanted to discuss opportunities. I almost begged off. My gut was still twisted from finding that forged form. But a father doesn't refuse his daughter's invitation easily. Their house in Mesa was bigger than they could afford. Granite countertops, stainless appliances, but credit cards humming just beneath the shine. Derek poured me a drink the moment I walked in, his smile wide but his eyes sharp. "Frank," he said, clapping me on the back, "we've been thinking. This ranch of yours, it's prime land. Developers are sniffing around. You could sell it, cash out, enjoy life instead of patching fences at your age." I set the glass down untouched. "The ranch isn't for sale. Not now, not ever." Laura's fork clinked against her plate. "Dad, no one's saying give it up forever. Just think about downsizing. You'd be more comfortable." "Comfortable?" I asked, my voice steady. "I was comfortable sleeping in sandstorms with mortar fire. I don't need a condo to feel alive." Derek leaned forward, smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Come on, Frank. Don't be sentimental. The truth is, you can't keep up with 80 acres. You're slowing down. And let's be honest, your signature already says you agree with me." The room froze. Laura shot him a warning glance, but the words were out. He knew. He'd seen the panic in my face when I found that paper. I locked eyes with him. Funny thing, but Derek, a man knows when he's signed his name and when he hasn't. He shrugged, taking a long sip of wine. Sometimes memory fades. Happens to the best of us. But hey, I'm just trying to look out for family. The insult hung heavy, sharper than any battlefield taunt. Age, memory, uselessness. He wanted me to believe I was slipping, that my hands weren't steady enough to know my own pen stroke. I pushed back my chair, the legs scraping the tile. "You enjoy your dinner. I'll enjoy my land. And we'll see who forgets what." Laura called after me as I grabbed my coat. But I didn't turn around, because I knew now this wasn't just about land. This was war, dressed up in family smiles, and Derek had just fired the first shot. The next morning I drove straight into town, that forged form burning a hole in my mind. I wanted to hear from the source. The county clerk's office smelled like toner and old carpet. Behind the counter, a young woman flipped through manila folders until she found mine. She slid the copy across to me. "According to our records, Mr. Lawson, you signed the transfer request 2 weeks ago. It was notarized in Mesa." I stared at the page. My name flowed across the line, but it wasn't mine. I'd spent decades signing checks, discharge papers, mortgage renewals. My hand had its rhythm. This was clumsy mimicry. "Who notarized it?" I asked. She checked her computer. "A Harold Klein." The name meant nothing to me, but Mesa was Derek's backyard. That night, I drove to Laura's house again. She answered the door, worry etched on her face. Derek was in the living room, beer in hand, watching the game. I tossed the form onto the coffee table. "You want to explain this?" Laura's eyes darted to Derek, then back to me. "Dad, maybe we should—" "No," I cut her off. "This is my name, on my land. Forged. I want the truth." Derek didn't flinch. He leaned back, took a sip, and smiled like a man who'd already won. "Truth is, Frank, sometimes paperwork gets streamlined. Nobody's trying to hurt you. Think of it as securing the family's future." "Future?" I snapped. "Whose future? Yours?" Laura's voice broke in, pleading. "Dad, please. Derek just thinks I'm too old to know my own signature?" I said, staring her down. The room went quiet. The TV blared some commentator's voice, but it felt like we were in a vacuum. Derek finally spoke, his tone dripping with condescension. "Look, you can fight this if you want. But the fact is, courts don't side with senile old men who can't even remember what they signed. Ask yourself, Frank, are you ready to drag your own daughter through that?" The words landed like a gut punch. He wasn't just coming for my land. He was using Laura as his shield. I stood in the doorway, hand on the knob, every muscle tense. "You're making a mistake, Derek. And when the truth comes out, it won't be me standing alone." I left him smirking on the couch, but as I stepped into the night air, a single thought stayed with me. This fight had just turned into a war of attrition, and Derek thought I'd break first. 2 weeks later, I drove into town to pay the feed bill. As I passed the clerk's office, something pulled me inside. A gut feeling. The clerk from before wasn't there. An older man with wire-rimmed glasses looked up. "Name?" he asked. "Lawson. Frank Lawson. Checking on property filings." He rifled through the drawer, then handed me a thick folder. I opened it, and my stomach sank. Not only had the transfer request been filed, it had been approved, pending a final signature from the buyer. The buyer was a real estate development company out of Phoenix. They'd already scheduled a site inspection for the spring. My ranch, my soil, my fences, the barn where I'd raised Laura, was being carved into future lots without my consent. I slammed the folder shut. "This is fraud," the clerk shrugged. "Not my department, sir. It's notarized, filed, and moving through the system. You'll have to contest it in court." Court, lawyers, time I didn't have. Driving home, the horizon swam. For the first time since Iraq, I felt that familiar weight pressing down, the knowledge that the ground under my boots wasn't secure. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table staring at the form. My daughter's handwriting appeared in the witness line. Laura. She'd signed as a witness. My throat tightened. She wasn't just looking away. She was in it. The knock on my door startled me. It was Tom Rourke, an old Marine buddy who'd settled in town. Gray hair, still broad-shouldered, with a limp from Fallujah that never healed. "Frank," he said, stepping inside without asking. "I heard rumblings. You selling your place?" "No," I muttered, sliding the papers across the table. "But someone thinks I am." Tom skimmed them, his jaw tightening. "This is dirty, real dirty." I rubbed my temples. "Derek's behind it. And Laura, she signed as witness." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then Tom leaned forward, his voice low. "You're not alone in this. I've still got contacts. Guys who know how to dig. If Derek's cutting corners, we'll find them." The relief hit me like oxygen. For weeks I'd been carrying this weight alone. Now someone was in the foxhole with me. Outside, coyotes howled across the desert. Inside, I clenched my fists. The betrayal had sunk deep, but so had my resolve. The first sign came when I stopped at the co-op to buy feed. My debit card was declined. I laughed it off, tried again. Declined. The cashier gave me that half-pitying smile young people reserve for old men. At the bank, the manager pulled me into her office. "Mr. Lawson, there's been activity on your accounts. Large withdrawals, all tied to authorization forms with your signature." She turned the screen so I could see. My name sprawled across forms to drain my savings into a joint account with Laura and Derek. The balance that should have covered me through winter had been gutted. "Those aren't my signatures," I said, my voice flat. "I'm sorry, Mr. Lawson, but unless you can prove forgery, the system treats them as valid." I walked out with my jaw clenched so hard it hurt. Back at the ranch, the place felt hollow. The barns stood dark. The wind rattled the tin roof. My stomach growled, but I didn't bother cooking. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table with a cold plate of leftovers, eating in silence. The only sound was the tick of the wall clock and the occasional groan of the pipes. I glanced at the photo on the mantel. Me, Laura, and her mother years ago, smiling after a county fair. The memory twisted like a knife. How had we gone from that to this? By midnight, the power flickered. When I stepped outside, I found the meter tagged. Past due notice stuck to the box. They'd cut me off if I didn't pay. I leaned against the porch post, staring out at the moonlit pasture. For the first time in decades, I felt small on my own land, like an intruder instead of its keeper. Tom called, but I let it ring. What could I say? That I'd lost not just money, but my daughter's trust. That the family I fought wars to protect was the same family dismantling me piece by piece. Inside, I lowered myself into the old recliner. The springs groaned under my weight. My hands that once gripped rifles steady as stone, trembled as I set down the empty plate. I had never felt more alone. And yet, in the darkness, one thought cut through. If Derek thought this would break me, he'd underestimated the wrong Marine. 3 days passed in a fog. I moved through the ranch like a ghost, feeding the horses, patching a fence, then collapsing back into the recliner as if the weight of betrayal pressed me down. That Friday, Tom showed up unannounced, 2 cups of diner coffee in hand. He set one in front of me, then scanned the dark kitchen. "This place feels like a bunker after a firefight," he said quietly. "Except you've already surrendered." His words stung, but they lit something in me. I muttered, "What's left to fight for? The accounts are drained. Paperwork says I sold out. Even Laura signed her name to it." Tom leaned forward. "That's exactly why you fight. Because if you don't, Derek walks off with your ranch, your money, and your legacy. Marines don't fold, Frank. not when the odds are stacked. I stared into the steam rising from the coffee. He was right. I hadn't survived deployments and firefights to let a slick son-in-law bury me with ink on paper. Tom pulled a folder from his jacket. I asked around. This notary, Harold Klein, been flagged before for questionable filings. Nothing ever stuck, but lawyers have whispered his name for years. Guess who notarized your so-called signature? I took the folder, my pulse quickening. Inside were clippings, old property disputes, whispers of falsified forms, all tied to Klein. Tom grinned, the same grin he'd worn in uniform when we found enemy positions. We've got a starting point. If Klein bent the rules for Derek once, odds are he bent them more. We find proof. We unravel everything. Something shifted inside me. The despair cracked, and beneath it, the old steel resurfaced. I wasn't beaten. I'd just been staggered. I stood, stretching my back until it popped. All right, Tom. If they want a war, we'll give them one. But not loud. Not yet. We'll dig. We'll gather. Then we strike. Tom raised his cup. That's the Frank I remember. The clock ticked steadily on the wall. For the first time in weeks, I heard it not as a countdown to loss, but as a drumbeat. I was awake again, and Derek Lawson had no idea what storm was about to roll over him. Tom and I sat at the kitchen table until the coffee pot was empty, mapping out every angle. I pulled out a yellow legal pad, the same kind I'd used to track supply lists in the Corps. Now it became my battle board. Step 1. Verify every document with my supposed signature. If Derek forged one, he likely forged more. Step 2. Dig into Klein, the notary. If he cut corners, there would be whispers, maybe even formal complaints. Step 3. Secure independent witnesses, people who could vouch for my handwriting, my habits, my character. Men like Pete from the co-op, neighbors who'd seen me sign feed slips for decades. Step 4. Bait Derek into bragging. A man like him, riding high on greed, couldn't resist showing off. Tom smirked. You always did like running ops with lists. I shrugged. Clarity keeps the mission alive. We divided tasks. Tom would reach out to an old contact in records management who could quietly pull notarization logs. I'd request copies of all transactions tied to my name at the bank and registrar, comparing them against my verified signatures. But the plan wasn't just paperwork. We needed leverage. I circled the word evidence at the top of the page, underlining it twice. Paper's good, Tom said, tapping the pad. But voice and visuals, that's gold. We catch Derek running his mouth, or Klein slipping, that's the hammer. The thought made my pulse steady, like the calm before a mission. Late that night, I dug out my old footlocker. Among medals and faded letters, I found what I was looking for. A small digital recorder. Dusty but still working, I clicked it on, the red light glowing, a tool simple but lethal in the right hands. Tom grinned. Guess we're back in business. I stared at the recorder, then at the forged signature on the table. He thinks I'm too old, too slow, too blind. Let him keep thinking that. Because the truth was, I wasn't just planning to defend my land anymore. I was planning to expose Derek so completely that when the time came, no court, no neighbor, no family member could doubt what he'd done. The trap was set. All that remained was the bait, and Derek, arrogant as ever, would provide it himself. On Monday morning, I drove straight to the bank. The manager, a woman named Miss Carter, had known me since Laura was in pigtails. She looked uneasy when I asked for copies of every withdrawal authorization tied to my name over the past 6 months. Frank, she said carefully, this could stir up trouble. Are you sure? I leaned forward. They've already stirred it. I just want my truth. She sighed, keyed a few strokes, and printed a stack of forms. Each one bore my name. Some clean, some rushed. I flipped through until one stopped me cold. It was a faxed authorization for a $40,000 transfer to a joint account. My supposed signature sprawled across the bottom. But here's the thing. Back in the core, my L in Lawson always had a distinct hook. Muscle memory. Even arthritis couldn't take it away. On this fax, the hook was gone, replaced by a lazy curve. I pulled out an old mortgage record from my truck, placed them side by side. The difference was glaring. Miss Carter frowned. "That doesn't look like yours." "Because it isn't," she nodded slowly. "I'll certify these as true copies. But Frank, be careful. If your son-in-law's behind this, he's in deep. People who forge don't just stop." That evening, Tom came over. I spread the documents across the table under the lamplight. His eyes narrowed. "That's your first bullet right there. Bank-certified evidence the signature doesn't match." I tapped the recorder sitting beside the stack. "Now we need him to talk. Brag, admit." Tom chuckled darkly. "And Derek's just the kind of fool to do it." Later that week, Laura called. Her voice was sweet but strained. "Dad, Derek says you've been snooping. Why don't you just trust us? We're family." "Family doesn't forge names," I said flatly. Silence, then a quick, "We'll talk soon," before she hung up. I set the phone down, heart heavy. My daughter was neck-deep in this, whether by choice or by Derek's persuasion. But grief could wait. The first piece of physical proof sat on my table, certified and undeniable. The noose was tightening, and Derek didn't even feel the rope yet. Friday night, Laura invited me over again. I almost didn't go, but Tom said, "Sometimes you have to show your cards just to see how they blink." So I tucked the certified bank copies into my jacket and drove into Mesa. They were waiting in the dining room. Laura looked pale, eyes darting between us. Derek, on the other hand, leaned back in his chair, smug as a cat that had already eaten the canary. "Frank," he said smoothly, "we need to move past this paranoia. You're making things harder than they need to be." I laid the papers on the table. "Then explain these." Laura reached first, her hand trembling as she read. Derek snatched the second page, scanned it, then laughed. A short, ugly sound. "Bank paperwork," he said. "So what? You authorized it? Maybe you don't remember." I slid the mortgage record across beside it. "That's my signature, and that," I jabbed at the transfer form, "is yours pretending to be mine." Laura's face drained of color. "Derek, is that true?" He waved her off. "Don't be naive, Laura. This is business. Your dad's had that money sitting there for decades. We're just putting it to work." Her voice cracked. "By lying? By stealing?" Derek's jaw tightened. He turned his gaze back to me, his smile gone. "You think one shaky letter will hold up in court? All I have to do is say you're confused, maybe even slipping. Who do you think they'll believe? The younger man with clean books or the old Marine with fading memory?" For a moment the room was silent except for Laura's shaky breathing. I stood tall, keeping my voice even. "They'll believe the truth, and the truth has a way of surfacing, Derek. You can count on that." Laura pushed back from the table, tears welling. "I trusted you," she whispered. "I thought you were helping us." Derek tried to soothe her, but she pulled away, storming down the hall. He turned back to me, fury flashing in his eyes. "You just made a mistake, old man." I leaned in close enough to smell the bourbon on his breath. "No, Derek. The mistake was underestimating me. And as I walked out the door, I knew one thing for certain. The mask had slipped, and Laura had seen it too. The threats started small. First, a voicemail at dawn. Derek's voice low and slurred. "You keep pushing this, Frank. You'll regret it. Don't forget whose daughter you'll drag down with you." I saved it. Evidence plain and raw. 2 nights later, I found an envelope wedged under my cabin door. Inside was a single page torn from a legal pad. Drop it or lose everything. The letters were jagged, pressed hard into the paper like anger itself had written them. I sat at the kitchen table with the note under the lamplight. My stomach should have knotted, but instead I felt something sharper. Clarity. Threats were signs of weakness, not strength. Derek was slipping. Tom came by the next morning, and I showed him both the voicemail and the note. He whistled. "Man's desperate. Desperate men make mistakes. You've got him cornered, Frank. Just keep collecting." Later that week, I drove into town for supplies and nearly bumped into Kelly Myers at the feed store. She was fresh out of law school, hung her shingle right on Main Street. Her family had farmed here 3 generations, so she knew the weight of land and legacy. "Mr. Lawson," she said, pushing her glasses up, "I've been hearing rumors. Something about forged deeds." I hesitated, but Tom had told me once, "Pick your allies wisely, but don't fight alone." I handed her a copy of the certified transfer form. She studied it, her brow furrowed. "This isn't just family drama," she said finally. "This is criminal, and if you're willing, I'll stand with you. Pro bono." Her confidence steadied me. "You sure? Taking on Derek means making enemies." Kelly's eyes hardened. "Better to make enemies by doing right than friends by staying quiet." That night, I sat on the porch, the desert wind sharp against my face. Derek thought intimidation would silence me. Instead, he'd handed me another weapon. Threats captured, allies rallied. The war wasn't just mine anymore. Now I had a Marine brother at my side and a young lawyer ready to fight. And Derek? He had nothing but fear, anger, and a shrinking circle of lies. Saturday night, Tom called. His voice carried a grin I hadn't heard in weeks. "Frank, you're gonna want to see this. Meet me at O'Malley's." The bar buzzed with neon and jukebox twang when I walked in. Tom was at a corner booth with his phone on the table. He tapped the screen, and a grainy video filled the air between us. There was Derek, glass of bourbon in hand, holding court with 2 drinking buddies. His cheeks were red, his voice just loud enough to carry. "Old man doesn't know a damn thing," Derek crowed. "I've got his name down perfect. Bank, county, smooth as butter. By the time he figures it out, Laura and I will be miles ahead." The video caught laughter, clinking glasses, then Derek again. Hell, his memory's shot. You could stick any paper in front of him. He'd probably sign it himself. "The ranch? It's already mine, boys. Man's too stubborn to know he's finished." Tom paused the clip. The words hung heavy between us. "Got it clean," he said. "My nephew works the bar, recorded the whole thing on his phone." I leaned back, breath steady but fists clenched. This wasn't just forgery anymore. It was a confession. Boastful, arrogant, damning. We handed the recording to Kelly the next morning in her small law office. She listened twice, jaw tightening. "This plus the forged bank forms and the threats? It's airtight. Judges don't ignore video admissions, especially when they're bragging about crimes." She slid the phone back across the desk. "Frank, we've moved past defense. It's time to go on the offensive. We file charges, fraud, forgery, conspiracy." For the first time since this started, I felt the tide turn. Not just suspicion, not just circumstantial whispers. Hard proof. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with the recorder, the bank copies, and now the bar video. Each piece was a bullet, chambered and ready. Derek had mocked me as old, confused, irrelevant. But come morning, the whole county would know exactly who was confused. Him. The courthouse smelled faintly of pine cleaner and paper dust, the kind of place where lives get rearranged in neat, legal sentences. I walked in wearing my only suit, Tom at my side like we were reporting for duty again. Kelly was already there, calm and sharp in her navy blazer, a thick binder of evidence under her arm. Across the aisle sat Derek, jaw tight, eyes darting. Laura sat behind him, pale and shaken, as if she wasn't sure anymore which side she belonged to. The judge, a stern woman with steel gray hair, called us to order. Kelly stood and began laying it out piece by piece. First came the certified bank forms, the transfers with my forged signature. Miss Carter, the bank manager, testified that the handwriting didn't match and that the forms had raised red flags. Then came the notarized land transfer. Kelly flipped to the page with Harold Klein's name. A county investigator confirmed Klein had a history of irregularities in notarizations. Murmurs rippled through the gallery. Kelly didn't pause. She queued up the voicemail. Derek's own voice filled the courtroom. "You keep pushing this, Frank. You'll regret it." Derek shifted in his seat, sweat beading at his collar. The judge's frown deepened. Then Kelly dropped the hammer. The barroom recording. Derek on video, bourbon in hand, laughing, bragging about forging my name, calling me too senile to notice. The audio was clear, undeniable. Laura covered her face, tears spilling through her fingers. When Derek's lawyer sputtered objections, the judge cut him off. "Sit down. This is damning." Finally, Kelly turned toward me. "Mr. Lawson, did you ever authorize Derek Lawson to sell your land or transfer your savings?" I stood tall, voice steady. "No, ma'am, never. Those signatures are not mine. That ranch has been my life's work, and I would die before I signed it away to him." The courtroom was silent, the weight of it hanging like a final salute. The judge leaned forward. "This court finds overwhelming evidence of fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. The land transfer is voided. The funds must be restored. Mr. Derek Lawson, you are hereby referred for criminal prosecution." The gavel cracked like a rifle shot. Derek exploded, shouting as deputies grabbed his arms. "It's mine! He's lying! You'll regret this, old man!" His words bounced off the chamber walls, empty and desperate. I looked at him one last time. "You underestimated the wrong Marine." As they hauled him away, Laura's eyes met mine, full of shame and regret. But that reckoning was for another day. For now, justice had spoken, and my land, my life, was mine again.